What if the only way to save the man you loved was to lie to him about everything? This is a story about a billionaire who forgot and the assistant who pretended to be his wife. Listen until the end, because the truth always comes out. The first thing you need to understand about invisibility is that it's a choice you make so many times it stops feeling like choosing. I chose it every morning at 6:47 a.m. when I arrived at Kane Industries before Silas did. Chose it when I adjusted the thermostat in his office to exactly 68 degrees because anything warmer made him irritable during afternoon calls. Chose it when I placed his coffee on the corner of his desk. 2 sugars, oat milk, ceramic cup, never paper, and left before he looked up from his screen. 3 years of choosing. My name is Mara Chen, and I'm not anyone's protagonist. I'm 29, 5'4" and flaps I replace every 6 months because I walk 12 miles a day in these hallways. I have a studio apartment in Queens with a window that faces a brick wall, and I'm in love with a man who wouldn't recognize me in an elevator if we were the only 2 people inside. The morning of the accident started like any other morning. I watched Silas through the glass wall of his office, the way I'd watched him 1,000 times before. He was on the phone, pacing, one hand cutting through air as he dismantled someone's argument with surgical precision. 42 years old, 6'2", dark-haired touched with gray at the temples that he'd earned through 16-hour days and decisions that moved markets. He was beautiful the way winter is beautiful, remote and perfect and untouchable. I'd memorized him in pieces over 3 years. The way his jaw tensed when he was containing anger, the precise moment his eyes shifted from calculating to closed off, usually around 4 p.m. on Thursdays, the rare, devastating smile that appeared maybe twice a month, never for me, that transformed his entire face into something almost vulnerable. I knew he took his mother's death hard at 19 and built an empire as a monument to her memory. I knew he'd been engaged once, 7 years ago, to a woman named Diane who left him because, in her words captured by page 6, loving Silas Kane is like loving a very beautiful, very expensive statue. I knew he drank single malt scotch when deals went bad and didn't drink at all when they went well. I knew he ran 6 miles every morning at 5 a.m. and that he was reading his way through Dostoevsky for the 3rd time. I knew he slept 4 hours a night, and sometimes I heard exhaustion in his voice like distant thunder. I knew everything, except how to make him see me as anything more than the woman who kept his calendar. Mara, his voice through the intercom made me straighten automatically, muscle memory from 1,000 identical moments. I need the Singapore contracts reviewed by noon, and push my 2 p.m. back an hour. Of course, Mr. Kane. Mr. Kane. Never Silas. The distance was built into the architecture of our relationship, brick by careful brick. I watched him hang up, return to his screen, the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows turning him into a silhouette. My phone buzzed. Calendar reminder. In 3 days, I had a dentist appointment I'd scheduled 6 months ago. I'd have to cancel it, again, because Silas had a board meeting and he needed me there to manage logistics, even though my job was officially executive assistant and unofficially the person who makes sure Silas Kane's brilliance isn't derailed by the mundane requirements of being human. My best friend Keiko said I was complicit in my own erasure. She was right, but she'd never felt what it was like to be the only person someone trusted, even if that trust was unconscious, administrative, ultimately meaningless. The Singapore contracts took me 90 minutes. I flagged 3 clauses that would cause problems in arbitration, sent them back with notes. Silas replied with a single word: good. I saved that email. I saved them all. The ones where he acknowledged my existence for a few characters. I had a folder labeled correspondence that was really labeled proof I matter, and I was self-aware enough to know that was pathetic, and not self-aware enough to delete it. At 11:30 a.m., Silas left for lunch with a venture capital firm courting his investment. He didn't say goodbye. He never did. The office exhaled in his absence. People spoke at normal volumes, laughed, existed in 3 dimensions instead of flattening themselves against walls when he passed. I ate a salad at my desk and reviewed his afternoon schedule. 3 meetings, 2 calls, 1 interview with Forbes that his publicist had begged him to do. Evening was blank, which meant he'd work until midnight, which meant I'd stay until 9 p.m. to handle any emergencies that emerged. My mother called at 2:15. I let it go to voicemail. She wanted to know why I wasn't dating, wasn't pursuing my own dreams, wasn't living a life that extended beyond the radius of Silas Kane's needs. The answer was complicated and simple. This was my life. Loving him from a distance that felt like a career. At 3:47 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Mara Chen? Yes. This is Mount Sinai Hospital. You're listed as the emergency contact for Silas Kane. There's been an accident. The world tilted. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, lukewarm liquid spreading across expense reports I'd printed for his review. I watched the brown stain bloom and couldn't make myself care. What happened? Car accident. He's in surgery now. Head trauma. We need you to come immediately. The woman's voice was professional, distant, but I heard something underneath it. The tone people use when they're preparing you for bad news they haven't delivered yet. Is he? I couldn't finish the question. My throat had closed around the words. He's alive, but you need to come now. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember telling anyone I was leaving. I remember grabbing my purse, my hands shaking so hard I dropped it twice. I remember the elevator taking forever, each floor a separate eternity. I remember stumbling out onto the street and not being able to remember how to hail a cab. A taxi stopped. I gave the driver the hospital name. He said something about traffic, and I nodded without hearing him. The city moved past the window, buildings and people, and life continuing like the world hadn't just cracked open. I'd been Silas Kane's emergency contact for 2 years. It was an administrative detail, something his lawyer had insisted on. You need someone local, the lawyer had said during a meeting I'd sat in on to take notes. Miss Chen is the logical choice. Silas had shrugged. Fine, Mara, handle the paperwork. I'd handled the paperwork, signed forms that said I was the person they'd call if something went wrong. I'd filed them away and never thought about them again, the way you never think about insurance until you need it. Now, I needed it. Now, he needed me. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I gave them Silas's name at the front desk, my voice barely working. The receptionist made a call, and a nurse appeared to lead me through corridors that all looked the same. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, the soft beeping of machines keeping people alive. Are you family? The nurse asked. I'm his emergency contact. She nodded like that was close enough, led me to a surgical waiting room with chairs that had been sat in by too many people waiting for too many terrible things. A doctor appeared. young woman with exhaustion written in the lines around her eyes, still in scrubs. "Miss Chen, I'm Dr. Patel. Mr. Kane came through surgery successfully, but there's significant trauma to the temporal lobe. We won't know the extent of damage until he wakes up." "When will that be?" My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "Could be hours, could be days. Are you his wife?" The question hit me like a physical thing. "No, I'm his assistant." Dr. Patel's expression shifted slightly. Not judgment exactly, something more complicated. "Is there other family we should notify?" "No." The word came out flat. "His parents are dead. No siblings, no wife, no children. There's no one else." And that was true. That was the saddest, truest thing about Silas Kane. He'd built an empire, but had no one to inherit it. No wife, no children, no siblings, parents dead, friends kept at arm's. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat in that hospital chair with Silas's hand in mine, watching the numbers on his monitors climb and fall, each beep a tiny heartbeat of time passing, taking me further from the moment I could have told the truth. At 3 a.m., a nurse came in to check his vitals. She smiled at me. "You should go home, honey. Get some rest. He's stable." "I can't leave him." She nodded like she understood, like she'd seen this before. Devotion that made no sense to anyone except the person feeling it. When she left, I took out my phone. Keiko had called 3 times, texted 12. I typed out a response. "He's okay. Awake. I'll call you tomorrow." What I didn't type. "He thinks I'm his wife." I didn't correct him. "I'm in free fall, and I don't know how to pull the parachute." At 6 a.m., Silas stirred. His eyes opened, found me immediately, and relief flooded his face. "You're still here." "I told you, I'm not leaving." He squeezed my hand. "I had nightmares. Kept waking up thinking you were gone, that you'd never existed." He paused, his eyes searching my face. "Why can't I remember details? I know you. I know the feeling of you, but everything else is smoke." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "The doctor said it's normal. Your memory will come back. You just need time." "But you remember." His voice was soft, pleading. "Tell me more. About us. Please." And so I did. I wove lies out of wishes, building a history we'd never had. I told him about dates that never happened at restaurants I'd only seen through windows. I told him about the proposal that never was, on a bridge at sunset, with words I'd imagined him saying in 1,000 private fantasies. I told him we'd been married for 2 years, that we'd kept it quiet because he valued privacy and I didn't want to be known as the billionaire's wife. I told him I worked at Kane Industries, but in a different department, that we'd agreed to maintain professionalism at the office. Every lie came easier than the last. They poured out of me like water from a broken dam, and Silas drank them in like a dying man finding an oasis. "I wish I could remember our wedding," he said quietly. "That feels like something I should remember." "You will." I hoped my voice didn't shake. "Give it time." Dr. Patel came in at 8 a.m. with her clipboard and her careful eyes. She ran more tests, asked more questions. Silas said his memory remained fractured. He could recall his business, his education, facts and figures, but personal history was full of gaps. When she finished, she pulled me into the hallway again. "Miss Chen, I need to know, did you tell him?"
I couldn't read her eyes. I'm going to. He's so fragile right now. You're afraid that telling him the truth will make him stop looking at you the way he does in there. The accuracy of it stole my breath. Dr. Patel sighed. I can't force you to be honest with him, but I'm noting in his chart that there are discrepancies in the reported relationship status. If his family or actual next of kin comes forward, there is no one. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. I'm all he has. I'm the person he put on those forms. Me. Not because we were together, but because there was literally no one else. Something in Dr. Patel's face softened. That's even sadder than I thought. She let me go back in, let me continue the charade, because what else could she do? Call security? Force me to destroy the only anchor a traumatized man had? I told myself I was being kind, protecting him, that I'd tell the truth when he was stronger. I told myself a lot of things that morning. By afternoon, Silas was sitting up, looking more like himself. Color had returned to his face. He'd stopped reaching for me with quite so much desperation, though his hand still found mine every few minutes, checking that I was real. "You're releasing me tomorrow," said Dr. Patel. "Says I can recover at home as long as someone's with me. You'll be there, right?" Of course. The lie was automatic now, smooth. Our home. He tested the words like he was trying to make them feel real. "Can you describe it for me? I keep trying to picture it, but everything is fuzzy." I described his penthouse, the one I'd been to exactly 4 times in 3 years, always to drop off urgent documents, always staying less than 5 minutes. I described the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the minimalist furniture, the kitchen he never cooked in, the library where he kept his Dostoevsky collection. I described it like I lived there. "It sounds beautiful," he said softly. "Do we have photos? Of us?" My blood went cold. "Your phone was destroyed in the accident. Mine, I don't keep many photos. You know how you are about privacy." "That sounds like me," he smiled slightly. "Always careful, always controlled, always alone," I thought, but didn't say. That evening, his lawyer showed up in the room, Marcus Chen, no relation to me despite the shared last name. He was a sharp-eyed man in his 60s who'd known Silas for 15 years. He swept into the room with the confidence of someone who'd never been invisible in his life. "Silas," he clasped his shoulder. "Christ, you gave us all a scare. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a car." Silas's attempt at humor fell flat. "Marcus, this is Mara Chen, his wife," I said before he could, extended my hand and met Marcus's eyes and saw the confusion there. Marcus shook my hand slowly. "Wife?" His eyes cut to Silas. "Since when?" "2 years. You knew that." You didn't?" Marcus's face was a careful mask. "Of course I did. I apologize. The stress must have—" "Yes, of course." He turned to me. "Miss Chen, could I have a word with you? Privately." We stepped into the hallway. Marcus waited until we were out of earshot before speaking. What the hell is going on? Silas isn't married. I'd know if he was married. I handle all his legal affairs. He has a head injury. He's confused, or you're lying to him. Marcus's voice was low but sharp. "I know who you are. You're his assistant. I've seen you around the office. You bring him coffee and manage his schedule, and you're certainly not his wife." My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my pockets. "He woke up thinking I was. The doctor said, not to contradict him, that It could cause more trauma. That's not what the doctor told you, and we both know it. Marcus studied me with the expression of a man who'd cross-examined hundreds of witnesses. Why are you doing this? Because he has no one else. The words came out raw, true. You know him. You know what his life is. Work and more work and nothing else. No family, no friends, no one who'd sit in that room with him at 3 a.m. while he had nightmares about being alone. I'm all he has, and if lying to him for a few days while he heals means he's not terrified? A few days? Marcus's eyebrows rose. You think this ends in a few days? You've started something you can't control. When his memory comes back, and it will come back, he's going to remember that you lied to him, that you took advantage of his vulnerability. And Silas Kane doesn't forgive things like that. I know. And you're doing it anyway? Yes. Marcus exhaled slowly, looked toward the hospital room where Silas was waiting. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. He's listed you as his medical proxy. Did you know that? I shook my head. 2 years ago, after his last health scare, a minor heart arrhythmia, nothing serious. He updated all his legal documents, put your name on everything, emergency contact, medical proxy, even a beneficiary clause in his will. He said you were the only person he trusted to make decisions that were in his best interest rather than someone else's agenda. I felt like I'd been punched. He said that? He did. And now you're proving him either very right or very wrong, and I don't know which. Marcus straightened his jacket. I'm going to go along with this. For now. Because you're technically correct. He has no one else. But understand something, Miss Chen. When this falls apart, and it will fall apart, you'll lose your job, your reputation, possibly face legal consequences.
Let's pause for a second. Mara is in deep water right now. If you were in her shoes, scared, invisible, and holding the hand of the person you love, would you tell the truth immediately, or would you keep the lie going just a little longer? Tell me in the comments what you would do. I read every single one.
The hospital discharged Silas at 10 a.m. I'd barely slept, running through conversations in my head, different ways to tell him the truth, different words that might soften the blow. By dawn, I'd convinced myself I'd do it as soon as we got to his apartment. Clean break, quick truth. But when I walked into his hospital room and saw him dressed in clothes I'd picked up from his place, black cashmere sweater, dark jeans, looking almost like himself except for the bandage still wrapped around his head, he smiled at me in a way Silas Kane had never smiled at anyone. Warm, open, unguarded. Ready to go home? He asked. The words I'd prepared dissolved like sugar in water. Ready, I said. The car service I'd arranged picked us up at the main entrance. Silas moved slowly, still unsteady, one hand braced against my shoulder for support. The driver opened the door, and Silas slid in carefully. I slid in beside him. He reached for my hand immediately, held it in his lap like it was something precious. Tell me about the first time you saw our apartment, he said, as we pulled into traffic. What did you think? I described walking into his penthouse for the first time, but instead of the truth, that I'd been there to drop off contracts at 11 p.m. because he needed them signed before morning, I invented something softer, a dinner he'd cooked, wine and candlelight. The city spread out below us like scattered diamonds. I said it was too much space for one person, and you said that's why you needed me there, to fill it. That sounds right. His thumb traced circles on my palm. I don't remember the words, but I remember the feeling. Like everything before you was just waiting. My throat tightened. Silas! I'm probably being too intense. Dr. Patel warned me I might be clingy while I recover, that it's normal to fixate on the one stable thing in the chaos. He looked at me, his gray eyes steady. But it doesn't feel like fixation. It feels like recognition. Like my brain forgot the details, but my body remembers you. I should have told him then. Should have said, that's because your body doesn't remember me. We've never touched like this. We've never been this close. Everything you're feeling is built on a foundation that doesn't exist. Instead, I squeezed his hand and said nothing. The penthouse felt different with him in it, knowing I'd be staying. The doorman greeted us. "Mr. Kane, welcome back." And I saw him note my presence with barely concealed curiosity. I'd been here before, but never like this. Never walking in beside Silas like I belonged. We took the private elevator to the 42nd floor. The doors opened directly into his apartment. 1,200 square feet of carefully curated minimalism. Everything in shades of gray and white and black. Clean lines, expensive emptiness. Silas moved through the space slowly, running his hand along the back of the leather sofa, the marble kitchen counter, the spines of books in his floor-to-ceiling library, looking for memories that weren't there. It's beautiful, but it feels... what? Cold, like a hotel, like no one actually lives here. He turned to me. Did I always keep it this impersonal? You valued simplicity. That's a diplomatic way of saying I'm emotionally unavailable, isn't it? He smiled slightly. Even with amnesia, I can read between the lines. I couldn't help it. I laughed, and his face transformed, lit up like I'd given him something valuable. "There it is," he said softly. "There what is? Your real laugh. You've been so careful with me, so controlled. But just then, that was real. I want more real. I want to know you. Really know you. Tell me something true." Everything inside me screamed a warning. This was the moment. This was where I could still salvage something honest from the wreckage I'd created. "What do you want to know?" I asked instead. "Everything. But start small." He settled onto the sofa, patted the space beside him. "Tell me how we met. The real version. Not the polished story for other people. The truth." I sat beside him, mind racing. The lies were getting more complex, requiring more architecture to support them. "We met at work." "You work at Kane Industries?" "I did, in acquisitions." The lie formed itself as I spoke. "You came to review a deal I'd put together. Everyone was terrified of you. You had this reputation for being impossible to impress. But you looked at my proposal and said, 'Finally, someone who actually did the math.'" I stopped. This was too detailed, too specific. I was building a world that would collapse the moment any small detail contradicted. "What did you say?" Silas prompted, leaning forward. "You said, 'Finally, someone who actually did the math.'" I smiled despite myself. "I always do the math. You asked me to dinner. I said no because you were technically my boss's 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 boss. You asked again the next day. I said no again. You sent flowers to my office with a note that said, 'I'm stubborn. You'll crack eventually.' I sent them back with a note that said, 'I'm stubborn too. Try again.' How long did it take? 3 months of you wearing me down. Then one night you showed up at my apartment in the rain, looking like a drowned rat, and said, 'I'm tired of trying to impress you. Can we just have pizza and talk like normal people?' And you let me in." "I let you in." The story felt so real as I told it that for a moment I believed it myself, believed in a version of us where he'd seen me, pursued me, wanted me badly enough to get soaked in the rain for the chance to talk. Silas was quiet for a long moment. I want that back. The memory of it. The feeling of knowing you were worth 3 months of rejection and a ruined suit. You will, I whispered. Your memory will come back. But what if it doesn't? What if I never remember and I'm just rebuilding myself from scratch based on what you tell me? The question hit too close to the truth. Then we'll rebuild together. He kissed my forehead. It was gentle, tentative, the kiss of a man who wasn't sure if he was allowed. And it broke something inside me because I knew I didn't deserve it. He said, I'm tired. Would you mind if we took a nap together? I I sleep better when you're close. How could I say no? We lay down in his massive bed, a bed I'd never seen before yesterday when I'd come to pick up clothes. He curled around me, his arm over my waist, his breath evening out almost immediately. And I lay there wide awake, feeling the weight of him against my back, knowing this was the most intimate I'd ever been with anyone. And it was all built on lies. My phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. You're in over your head. Call me. I silenced it, closed my eyes, told myself this was temporary. Just a few more days. Just until he was stronger. Then I'd tell him everything and deal with the consequences. Just a few more days. The lie was getting easier to believe.
3 days became a week. A week became 2. I stopped going to my apartment, except to grab clothes. Stopped answering Keiko's increasingly worried calls. Stopped thinking about the moment when this would all fall apart, because living in the pretend was easier than facing the inevitable. Dr. Patel had prescribed a recovery routine: rest, light exercise, cognitive exercises to help rebuild neural pathways. I became Silas's keeper of that routine, made sure he took his medications, made him rest when he pushed too hard, walked with him through Central Park in the early mornings when the city was still quiet. Those walks were my favorite, just the two of us and the sunrise and the fiction we were living. Silas would hold my hand and tell me about fragments of memory that returned, a business deal from 5 years ago, his mother's perfume, the first time he ran a marathon, but nothing personal, nothing that would reveal the truth. It's like watching a movie where someone edited out all the emotional scenes, he said one morning, pausing by the reservoir. I remember facts, but not feelings. Numbers, but not names. Everything important is missing. Give it time. You keep saying that. He turned to me, the morning light catching in his gray eyes. But what if time doesn't fix it? What if this is permanent and all I have are the stories you tell me? Then we make new memories, better ones. He kissed me then, really kissed me. Not the tentative, testing kisses of the first few days, but something real and hungry and desperate. And I kissed him back because I was too deep to do anything else. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I'm falling in love with you. My heart stopped. Silas? I know. I know that sounds insane. How can I fall in love with someone I technically already married? But it's true. Every day I discover something new about you. The way you hum while you cook. The way you argue with me when I think I'm working too hard. The way you look at me like I'm more than just the sum of my bank account. He pulled back to meet my eyes. I keep thinking, if I was smart enough to marry you before, then that version of me had at least one thing right.
I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe around the magnitude of what I'd done. He was falling in love with a fantasy, with a version of me I'd invented. And when it crumbled, and it would crumble, the fall would destroy us both. "Say something," he whispered. "I love you too." The words came out broken because they were true. I did love him, had loved him for 3 years, but they were also the cruelest lie yet, because the man I loved didn't exist. I'd fallen for an untouchable billionaire who barely knew my name, and he'd fallen for a fiction I'd created. We walked back to the penthouse in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. His hand in mine, the morning stretching out like a promise neither of us could keep. At the apartment, I made breakfast, while Silas showered. His phone, a replacement for the one destroyed in the accident, sat on the counter. It buzzed. A text from someone named Richard. "Quarterly board meeting next week. Need you there. How's the recovery?" My hands froze over the eggs I was scrambling. Board meeting, which meant Kane Industries, which meant people who knew the truth about who I really was. The bathroom door opened. Silas emerged in gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, hair still damp, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. "Something smells good." "Your phone buzzed." I kept my voice level. "Someone named Richard. Something about a board meeting." His face shifted. "Right, work. I've been avoiding it." "You don't have to go back yet. Doctor's orders." "I know, but I can't hide forever." He came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his chin on my shoulder. The domesticity of it made my chest ache. "Besides, maybe it'll help. Familiar environment. Might trigger some memories." Terror flooded through me. "You're not ready. You still have headaches. You still have gaps." "Mara," he turned to face me. "I can't put my entire life on hold because my brain is taking its time catching up. I have responsibilities. People depending on me." He paused. "Unless you think it's a bad idea." I thought it was a terrible idea. I thought it would be the beginning of the end. But I couldn't say that without explaining why. "I think you should do whatever feels right," I said carefully. "Then I'll start with something small. Maybe just reviewing files from home, getting back into the rhythm of it." He kissed my forehead. "Thank you for taking care of me, for being patient with all this." "You don't need to thank me." "I do. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful for it every day." The guilt was a physical weight. I plated the eggs, my hands shaking slightly, and we ate breakfast like a real couple, like this was our real life. After breakfast, Silas disappeared into a study to review files. I cleaned the kitchen, not because it needed cleaning, but because I needed something to do with my hands, something to stop them from shaking. My phone rang. Marcus. I stepped out onto the balcony to answer. "Hello?" "Miss Chen, we need to talk about the board meeting." "He's not ready." "That's not your call to make. The board is pressuring him to return. He can't avoid it indefinitely. More importantly, you can't avoid it. Half the board knows you as his assistant. The other half has never seen you before. When you walk into that room with him, holding his hand, calling yourself his wife, I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've created an impossible situation. Either you tell him the truth before that meeting, or the truth tells itself in front of 20 people who will make his vulnerability a matter of corporate record." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you suggest?" "Tell him. Tonight. Rip the Band-Aid off before it gets worse." "And if it breaks him? If the truth causes more damage than the lie? Then that's the consequence of lying in the first place." Marcus's voice was firm. but not unkind. You made a choice in that hospital room. Now you have to make another one. But you can't keep living in the middle. He hung up. I stood on the balcony, 42 stories above the city, and felt the ground dropping out from under me. That night, I cooked dinner. Pasta carbonara. I learned he liked it from 3 years of ordering his lunch. We ate by candlelight, talking about nothing important. He told me about a deal he'd been reviewing, the details coming back to him in pieces. I told him about a book I'd been reading, making up details, because I couldn't remember the last time I'd read anything that wasn't a contract or memo. After dinner, we settled on the sofa. Silas pulled me against his chest, his fingers playing with my hair. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why don't we have pictures? Of us, I mean. I've looked through everything. My phone, my laptop, this apartment. There's nothing. No photos, no mementos, no proof that we were together before the accident." My blood went cold. "You know how private you are, how careful about keeping your personal life separate." "But not for myself. Why wouldn't I have even one photo of my own wife?" His voice was soft, questioning, not accusing yet, but getting close. "It's strange, isn't it? You were in the process of getting a new phone. You were transferring data, remember? The accident happened in the middle of that. Everything got lost. The lie came so smoothly now. Too smoothly. And the apartment? Not even a wedding photo? We eloped. We didn't want the fuss. You said you'd rather spend money on our life than on one day. We were going to do photos eventually, just never got around to it." He was quiet for a long moment. I could feel the tension in his body, the way he was holding himself still. Finally, "Okay." But it wasn't okay. I felt him pulling back, just slightly, the first crack in his trust. That night, he held me in bed, but there was new distance between us, a question mark hovering in the space where certainty used to be. I lay awake listening to his breathing, knowing the clock was running out, knowing I'd run out of time to tell the truth before the truth told itself.
The memory came back to Silas during breakfast a week before the board meeting. We were eating in comfortable silence, or what I thought was comfortable. He was scrolling through his tablet, reviewing emails, getting ready to ease back into work. I was reading a book I'd grabbed from his shelf, pretending I could concentrate on the words. Then he went completely still. "Mara?" Something in his voice made my skin prickle. "Yes?" "I found something." He turned the tablet toward me. An email thread from 3 months ago. "Read this." My eyes scanned the text. It was a conversation between Silas and HR about updating his emergency contact information. And there it was, in black and white. "Please update my emergency contact from Janet Cruz to Mara Chen, administrative assistant. No family relationship." The air left the room. "You're my assistant." His voice was carefully neutral. "My assistant." "Silas, the email is from 3 months before the accident, which means you were my assistant then, which means—" His eyes met mine, and I saw the exact moment the foundation cracked. "We're not married." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Every lie I'd told was hanging between us like smoke, and I watched him see through them one by one. "How long—" His voice was quiet, deadly quiet. "How long were you planning to let me believe something that wasn't true? It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" He stood up, the chair scraping against hardwood. "Explain to me how this isn't exactly what it looks like." You were so scared. In the hospital, you woke up and you were terrified and confused. And when you saw me, you looked so relieved. And then you said I was your wife.
And I should have corrected you, but you looked so broken, and I just. The words tumbled out, tripping over themselves. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? His laugh was harsh. You were lying to me. You've been lying to me for. How long has it been? 3 weeks? Almost 4? 4 weeks. He dragged a hand through his hair. 4 weeks of you playing house in my life, letting me fall in love with someone who doesn't exist? I exist. Everything I told you about myself was true, except the part where we're married, except the part we have a history, except every single story you told me about us. His voice was rising now, the control he was famous for finally cracking. You let me believe we built a life together. You let me kiss you. You let me. He turned away. God, I trusted you. You were the only solid thing in the chaos, and it was all a lie. No, not all of it. I moved toward him, but he stepped back, holding up a hand. Don't. Don't come near me. The rejection was physical. I felt it in my chest like a fist. Let me explain. What's left to explain? You're my assistant. You were listed as my emergency contact because I have no one else. And when I woke up confused, you saw an opportunity to, what, live out some fantasy? The accusation stung because it was partially true. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I love you. The words came out broken. I've loved you for 3 years, since the first day I started working for you. And I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but you need to understand when you woke up and you looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than just the person who managed your calendar, I didn't know how to take that away from you, or from me. Silas stared at me like a stranger. 3 years. Yes. You've been in love with me for 3 years and never said anything? How could I? You barely knew I existed. You were furniture to me. Useful furniture, but still just my voice cracked. You were going to fire me. His brow furrowed. What? I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I'd saved a screenshot, one I'd taken from his laptop while he was recovering, telling myself I needed evidence that I wasn't crazy for thinking he'd never seen me. I pulled it up, showed him. It was a draft email from the day before his accident, subject line, Termination, Mara Chen. Marcus, I need you to draft termination papers from my executive assistant, effective immediately. Her familiarity is becoming uncomfortable. She anticipates my needs too well. It's unsettling. I need someone less present. Handle it quietly. I watched him read it, watched his face change from confusion to recognition to something that might have been shame. I wrote this. You never sent it. You got in the accident before you could, but yes, you wrote it. I put the phone away. So when you ask me why I lied, why I let you believe we were something we weren't, part of it was that for the first time in 3 years, you saw me. And I wasn't ready to go back to being invisible, especially not when you were about to erase me from your life entirely. Silas sank back into his chair. I don't know what to do with this. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry for lying, or sorry you got caught. Both, I thought, but didn't say. Sorry for all of it. We sat in silence. The city hummed outside the windows. Somewhere below, people were living honest lives, making honest choices, not building elaborate fictions that collapsed at the first touch of truth. I need time, Silas finally said. I need to think. Of course. And I need you to leave. The words hit like bullets. Leave! The apartment, now. He still wouldn't look at me. Go home. Your real home. Let me figure out what's real and what isn't without you here muddying everything. I stood on shaking legs. Silas, please. His voice cracked on the word. Just go. I went to the bedroom, threw my things into the overnight bag I'd been living out of. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip it. When I came back out, Silas was standing by the window, his back to me, shoulders rigid. "I'll have someone send your things from the office," he said without turning. "Consider this your notice. You're fired. Effective immediately." The finality of it stole my breath. "I understand." I walked to the door, paused with my hand on the handle. "For what it's worth, the man you became in these 4 weeks, he was better than the man you were before. Kinder, more open, less alone. I know you hate me right now, but I don't regret showing you that version of yourself, even if it cost me everything." I left before he could respond. The elevator doors closed on the life I'd invented, and I rode down 42 floors back to reality.
Be honest. If you were in Mara's shoes, lonely, invisible, and holding the hand of the man you loved, would you have done the same thing? Or is this a line you would never cross? My apartment felt like a museum of my former life. Everything exactly where I'd left it 4 weeks ago. Coffee mug in the sink, book open on the bedside table, bills stacked on the counter. But I felt like a completely different person than the one who'd lived here. That Mara had been invisible, but safe, comfortable in her quiet devotion, content to love from a distance. This Mara had tasted what it felt like to be seen and couldn't go back to the shadows. I dropped my bag by the door and just stood there, my reflection staring back at me from the dark TV screen. I looked hollow, used up, like someone who'd tried to hold sunlight in her hands and got burned for it. My phone buzzed. Keiko. I answered. "Where have you been? I've been calling for days." Her voice was sharp with worry. "He found out." Silence. Then, "Oh, babe, tell me everything." I told her. The email he'd found, the termination letter, the fight, the way he'd looked at me like I was a stranger who'd stolen something precious. By the time I finished, I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. "Come over," Keiko said immediately. "I'm ordering Thai food and we're going to eat our feelings like civilized people." I can't face anyone right now." "Too bad. I'll be there in 20 minutes." She hung up before I could argue. True to her word, Keiko showed up with enough pad thai to feed 4 people and a determination to extract every detail. We sat on my floor because my apartment was too small for proper furniture, eating from containers and dissecting the catastrophe I'd created. "Okay," Keiko said around a mouthful of noodles. "I'm not going to say I told you so. You just did. I'm also not going to tell you this was inevitable, even though it absolutely was." She pointed her chopsticks at me. "What I am going to say is this. You need to give him space. Let him process. And then, if he's willing, you need to have an honest conversation about what was real and what wasn't. He fired me. He told me to leave. There's nothing left to talk about." "There's everything to talk about, Mara. You spent 3 years in love with this man. That's real. Whatever happened in those 4 weeks, the parts where you were actually connecting, not just playing roles, that was real too, even if the framework was fake. How can it be real if it's built on lies? Because emotions aren't logical. You can't turn them off just because their origin story is messy." Keiko set down her container. "Look, what you did was wrong. We both know that. But it wasn't malicious. You didn't do it to hurt him. You did it because you're human, and you made a very human mistake in a very impossible situation. He'll never forgive me." "Maybe not, but you have to give him the chance to try." I wanted to believe her. Wanted to think there was a world where Silas and I could find our way back to something real. But the look on his face when he told me to leave, that was the look of a man who'd had his trust shattered. And Silas Kane didn't forgive betrayal.
I knew that better than anyone. The next morning, I woke up to an email from HR. My access to Kane Industries had been revoked. My final paycheck would be deposited within 2 weeks. My personal items from my desk would be mailed to me. 3 years erased in an email. I should have been devastated, should have cried or raged or done something dramatic. Instead, I just felt numb, like I'd been hollowed out, and all that was left was this empty shape of a person. I spent the day in my apartment, alternating between staring at my phone and forcing myself not to text him. What would I even say? I'm sorry felt inadequate. I love you felt manipulative. Please forgive me felt like I was asking for something I didn't deserve. By evening, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I went for a walk, no destination in mind, just needing to move. I ended up at Central Park, at the reservoir where Silas and I had walked every morning during his recovery. It was sunset. The water reflected the sky like molten gold. And standing at the railing, looking out at that same view, was Silas. My heart stopped. I should have turned around, should have given him the space he'd asked for. But my feet carried me forward before my brain could stop them. Silas! He turned. The bandage was gone from his head, leaving only a faint scar at his hairline. He looked tired, older, like the weight of remembering had cost him something. My chest tightened. And? And I was miserable. Successful, powerful, respected, but completely alone. By choice. He paused. I found the termination email, the one I wrote about you. I've read it maybe 100 times, trying to understand why I would fire someone who was that good at her job. You said it in the email. I was too present. I was afraid. The confession came out quiet. That's what I couldn't see until now. I was afraid that you saw through all the walls I'd built, that you knew me too well, that if I let you stay, you'd eventually figure out how empty I was underneath all the success. I didn't know what to say to that. The Mal I was before the accident would have fired you and never looked back. Would have convinced himself it was a practical decision, nothing personal. Would have gone back to his perfectly controlled, perfectly lonely life. But the man I became with you? He was different. He laughed. He took walks. He cooked dinner and talked about books and actually felt things instead of just calculating them. That man was built on a lie. Was he? Or did the lie just give me permission to be someone I was too afraid to be before? I don't understand. He moved closer. I've been going through security footage from the office before the accident. I watched myself walk past you 1,000 times. Watched you bring me coffee and leave before I looked up. Watched the board meeting where you fixed a crucial error in real time and I didn't even thank you. Watched you stay until midnight to handle emergencies that could have waited. I felt exposed, seen in a way that had nothing to do with lies or fantasies. I watched myself write that termination email, and do you know what I saw on my face? Not irritation, not professional distance, fear. I was afraid of how much I relied on you, how much I trusted you, how much space you'd taken up in my life without me noticing. Silas, you lied to me. You took advantage of my vulnerability. You let me fall in love with someone who didn't exist. His voice was steady now, no anger in it, just clarity. But you also showed me who I could be if I stopped being so afraid of connection. And I don't know how to reconcile those things. You don't have to. You don't owe me anything. I made my choices and I'll live with the consequences. What if I don't want you to? The question hung in the air between us. The sun was sinking lower now, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. And standing at the railing, looking out at that same view, was Silas. What if we started over? He continued slowly. Not as boss and assistant, not as husband and wife, just as two people who've seen each other at their worst and are still standing here. Hope flickered in my chest, dangerous and fragile. I don't know if that's possible. Neither do I, but I think I want to try. He reached out, tentative, and took my hand. I'm not promising anything. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm not sure I trust you yet. But I also can't stop thinking about you, and maybe that's the most real thing between us. Tears were running down my face now. I don't deserve a second chance. Probably not, but I'm not offering it because you deserve it. I'm offering it because I'm tired of living in a world where everyone is kept at arm's length, where I'm so busy protecting myself that I forget to actually live. He squeezed my hand. You were right about one thing. The man I was before the accident needed to die. The question is whether the man I am now can exist without the lies that created him. I don't know. Then let's find out together. We stood there as the sun set completely, holding hands like two people at the beginning of something instead of the end. It wasn't forgiveness yet. Maybe it never would be. But it was a doorway. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe.
We started with coffee. Not in his office or his apartment or any place that held the ghost of our lie. A small cafe in Brooklyn that neither of us had been to before. Neutral ground. Silas showed up in jeans and a sweater, looking more casual than I'd ever seen him in 3 years. I wore a simple dress, my hair pulled back, no pretense, just two people trying to figure out if there was anything real to build on. Ground rules, Silas said as we sat down with our cups. Complete honesty, no matter how uncomfortable. If we're doing this, we're doing it without the safety net of polite lies. Okay, I'll start. He wrapped his hands around his mug. I'm still angry. Every time I think about those 4 weeks, I feel humiliated, like I was this vulnerable thing you took advantage of. And I hate feeling that way, because it means admitting I was weak. The word stung, but I'd asked for honesty. Your turn to ask me something. Why did you stay, at Kane Industries, I mean, for 3 years, working for someone who barely saw you? Why not leave? I'd asked myself that question 1,000 times. At first, because the pay was good, and the work was interesting. Then, because I was good at it. Then, because I forced myself to meet his eyes. Because being invisible to you was still better than being visible to anyone else. You set a standard I couldn't find anywhere else. And somewhere along the way, proximity to excellence started to feel like enough. That's sad. I know. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the honesty settle. My term, I said. What are you hoping to get out of this, from trying again? Silas considered the question carefully. I want to know if the person I was with you, the version that cooked dinner and took walks and actually laughed, can exist without the amnesia as an excuse. I want to know if I can be that open when I have all my memories and all my defenses back. He paused. And I want to know who you are when you're not trying to be what you think I need. What if you don't like who that is? Then at least we'll know the truth. We met 3 more times that week, each time stripping away another layer. Silas told me about the pressure of building an empire at 25, the weight of being responsible for thousands of employees, the way his mother's death had taught him that loving people just gave them the power to destroy you. I told him about growing up as the invisible middle child, about learning early that being useful was the best way to be valued, about how I'd built an identity around anticipating needs and never having any of my own. We're both pretty damaged, Silas observed during our 4th coffee. Catastrophically. He smiled slightly. At least we're honest about it now. On the 5th meeting, he asked if I wanted to have dinner. Real dinner, not coffee. I said yes. We went to a small Italian place in the village.
The kind of restaurant where the tables were close together and the waiters knew everyone's name. We ordered wine and pasta and talked about things that had nothing to do with work or lies or the complicated knot we'd tied ourselves into. "Tell me something nobody knows about you," Silas said over tiramisu. I wanted to be a writer before I fell into administrative work. I wanted to write novels about people who were bigger than their circumstances. Why didn't you? Because writers need to believe their stories matter, and I stopped believing I mattered enough to tell them. His expression shifted. "That's the saddest thing you've said to me yet. Your turn. Tell me something nobody knows about you." He was quiet for a long moment. "I dream about my mother every night, have for 23 years, and every morning I wake up and she's dead all over again." He looked down at his wine glass. "I built Kane Industries to honor her, but really, I built it to avoid dealing with the fact that she's gone." I reached across the table, took his hand. He let me. "We're a mess," I said softly. "Complete disaster. Think we can fix each other?" "No. But maybe we can stop breaking ourselves." After dinner, he walked me to the subway. At the entrance, he hesitated. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "You don't have to ask permission." "Yes, I do. Everything before was built on false assumptions. This time, I need to know you're choosing it." I kissed him. Really kissed him. Not as his wife or his assistant or anything other than myself. And it felt different, terrifying and real and completely uncertain. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I'm still not sure I trust you," he whispered. "I know. But I want to. That's enough for now." We started seeing each other regularly. Not dating exactly, something more tentative than that. Two people learning each other without the protective coating of lies. Silas started therapy. He told me about it over coffee, how his therapist was helping him understand why he'd built his entire life around control and distance, how the accident had actually been a gift in disguise, forcing him to confront what he'd been avoiding. I started writing again, just for myself at first, 15 minutes a day of putting words on a page that no one would read. Silas asked if he could read some of it. I said no. He respected that. 6 weeks into our tentative reconstruction, Silas invited me to his apartment. "Just for dinner," he said quickly. "No expectations. I want to see if I can be in that space with you without feeling like I'm living in a museum of lies." The apartment looked different. He'd added things, color mostly, pillows on the couch that weren't gray, books that looked like they'd been read, a plant in the corner that was somehow still alive. "You redecorated," I said, trying to make it feel less like a hotel, more like a home. He moved to the kitchen, thought I'd try cooking. Fair warning, I'm terrible at it. Dinner was burnt chicken and overcooked vegetables, but we laughed about it, ordered pizza instead, sat on the floor eating from the box like college students. "Can I ask you something?" Silas said as we finished off the pizza. "Anything. Those 4 weeks when you were pretending to be my wife, did any of it feel real to you or was it all performance?" I thought about how to answer honestly. The framework was fake, but the emotions were real. Taking care of you, that was real. Worrying when you pushed yourself too hard, real. The way I felt when you kissed me, real. Even if the circumstances were artificial, what I felt wasn't. And now, without the lies, now it's scarier because there's no buffer, no role to hide behind. Just me, hoping I'm enough without being what you needed me to be. He pulled me closer, kissed my temple. "You're enough. Even when I'm angry at you, even when I'm not sure I should trust you, you're enough." We fell asleep on his couch, the TV playing quietly, the city humming outside. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt like we might actually survive this.
3 months after the accident, Silas returned to Kane Industries. He delayed it as long as he could, but the board was getting restless. There were decisions that needed to be made, deals that required his signature. He couldn't hide forever. He asked if I wanted to come with him. As what? I asked. As yourself, not my assistant anymore. Just someone who's important to me. If you want to be. I went. Walking into Kane Industries felt like entering a past life. The security guard who'd greeted me every morning for 3 years looked confused to see me coming in as a guest. The receptionist did a double take. Word spread fast in office buildings, and my sudden departure hadn't been quiet. Silas held my hand in the elevator. You okay? Terrified. Yeah, me too. The board meeting was in the main conference room. 20 people, most of whom I'd seen in passing but never interacted with. They stood when Silas entered, professional respect mixed with curiosity about his recovery, and about me, standing beside him. Marcus was there, of course. He caught my eye, gave me a small nod. Not forgiveness, exactly. Acknowledgement. Ladies and gentlemen, Silas said, taking his seat at the head of the table, thank you for your patience during my recovery. I know there have been questions about my fitness to continue as CEO. Let me address those directly. He spoke for 20 minutes about his medical status, his cognitive recovery, the steps he'd taken to ensure he could fulfill his responsibilities. He was articulate, confident, every inch the brilliant strategist they'd always known. Then he said, I also want to address the elephant in the room. Some of you may have heard rumors about my personal life, about confusion following the accident. I'm here to set the record straight. My heart started pounding. I experienced significant memory loss. In my confusion, I misidentified someone I trusted as being closer to me than she actually was. That confusion has been resolved. However, in the process of recovering, I realized I needed to make some significant changes in how I approach both my work and my life. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each board member. I've been the kind of CEO who puts the company before everything else. No family, no personal life, no interests outside this building. I told myself that made me more effective, more focused. But what it actually made me was rigid, isolated, and unable to see solutions that required thinking beyond quarterly returns. Murmurs around the table. Silas held up a hand. I'm not stepping down, but I am restructuring how I work. I'll be delegating more, working fewer hours, making space for a life that doesn't revolve entirely around this company. If the board finds that unacceptable, I'm prepared to discuss transition plans. Silence. Then the board chair, a woman named Patricia, who'd known Silas since he founded the company, spoke up. Silas, speaking personally, not as board chair, it's about damn time. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. We've watched you burn yourself to a crisp for 15 years. You're brilliant, irreplaceable in many ways, but you're also human, and you've been pretending you're not for too long. If the accident taught you that work-life balance is real, then consider it a lesson learned at a discount. Other board members nodded, voiced agreement. Some asked questions about specific responsibilities, how delegation would work, who would handle what. But the overall consensus was clear. They were relieved, not concerned. After the meeting, Patricia pulled Silas aside. I stayed back, not wanting to intrude, but she gestured for me to come closer. She said, You're Mara Chen, the assistant. I said, Former assistant. She said, I've heard stories about what happened during Silas's recovery. Her expression was unreadable. I don't know all the details, and I'm not asking for them. But I will say this. In 20 years of knowing Silas Kane, I've never seen him laugh. Not once. And when you walked into that conference room holding his hand, he was smiling. She looked at Silas. Whatever happened between you two, whatever complicated mess you're sorting through, it's made you more human. Don't lose that. She walked away before either of us could respond. Silas turned to me. Want to see my old office? We took the elevator to the executive floor, walked past curious stares and whispered conversations. Silas's office was exactly as I remembered it. Glass walls, massive desk, the view of the city that I'd seen 1,000 times from the other side. This is where you sat, Silas said, gesturing to my old desk outside his office. Right here. For 3 years. Every day. He walked past me every morning and never said good morning. I know. He reviewed my work and sent one-word emails instead of actual feedback. I saved them anyway. He looked at me. Why? Because I was starving for crumbs and you were the only person I wanted to feed me. The honesty of it hung between us. That's heartbreaking, Silas said quietly. It was my choice. No, it was my failure. He moved closer. I turned you into furniture, made you invisible because it was easier than acknowledging how much I relied on you. And when your presence started to feel too important, I decided to fire you rather than deal with my own feelings. You were scared. I was a coward. Maybe, but you're not anymore. He kissed me then in his office, with his glass walls in full view of anyone who cared to look. Not hiding, not pretending. Just two complicated people trying to build something real from broken pieces. When we pulled apart, he smiled. How would you feel about coming back? Not as my assistant, as something else. Director of operations, maybe. Equal footing. Your own office, your own team. Are you serious? Completely. You're brilliant at what you do, Mara. You always have been. I just never acknowledged it because I was too busy keeping you in a box that felt safe for me. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless of what happens with us personally. We left the office together, hand in hand, walking past the desk where I'd sat invisible for 3 years, and I felt the weight of that invisibility finally lifting. I was real now, flawed and honest and completely uncertain about the future, but real.
6 months after the accident, Silas and I went back to the reservoir. It had become our place, the spot where everything had started to shift from fiction to reality. We walked the path in comfortable silence, our hands linked, the fall air crisp and clean. I have something for you, Silas said, stopping at the railing where we'd had that first honest conversation. He pulled out a small box, not a ring box, something flatter. When I opened it, I found a key. To what? My apartment. Our apartment, if you want it to be. He rushed on before I could respond. Not because I think we should move in together right now, but because I want you to know you're welcome there. That it's not some fortress where you need permission to enter. You can come and go, have your own space, make it feel like home. I turned the key over in my palm. This is a big step. I know. And I know we're still figuring things out, still learning how to be honest with each other, still working through the mess we made. He took my hands. But I also know that I love you. The real you. Not the version you thought I needed. Just you. Tears were sliding down my face. I love you too. The real you. The one who burns dinner and goes to therapy and actually takes days off. The one who's still sometimes afraid of intimacy but is trying anyway? That one. He kissed me softly. I've been thinking about those 4 weeks, when you were lying to me, and I realized something. What? You showed me a version of myself
I didn't know existed. Someone who could be vulnerable, who could need someone, who could build a life that wasn't just work and loneliness. He paused. The framework was fake, but the transformation was real. And I think I needed that lie to become someone capable of this truth. Are you saying you're grateful I lied to you? No, I'm saying I'm grateful for what happened in spite of the lies. Because of them, even. It's complicated. Everything about us is complicated. Yeah, but it's ours. We walked another lap around the reservoir. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of amber and rose, the same view we'd seen that first evening when everything fell apart and started to rebuild. I'm taking the job, director of operations, but only if you promise we keep work and personal separate. I can't go back to being defined by proximity to you. Deal. You'll probably end up running the company better than I do anyway. Probably. He laughed, and the sound still made my heart do complicated things. We stopped at a bench, sat close together, watching the city lights start to flicker on. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever wish you could go back to before the accident, when you had all your memories intact and your life was completely under control? Silas was quiet for a long moment. No, because that version of me was dying slowly and calling it success. This version, the one who's terrified and uncertain and having to learn how to be human, is actually alive. He squeezed my hand. Besides, that version of me never would have seen you, really seen you, and that would have been the biggest loss of all. My phone buzzed. Text from Keiko. Dinner next week? Want to hear all the details of your complicated love story. I smiled. Keiko wants to have dinner. You up for meeting my friends? As my actual boyfriend, not my fake husband? Terrifying, but yes. Fair warning, she is going to grill you about your intentions. My intentions are to take this one day at a time and try not to mess it up too badly. Good answer. We sat there until the stars came out, until the city settled into its evening rhythm, until the air got cold enough that Silas wrapped his jacket around my shoulders. Ready to go home? Home. Such a simple word for such a complicated place. But as we walked back through the park toward his apartment, our apartment maybe, it felt right. Not perfect, not fixed, not without the scars of everything we'd been through, but real. And real, I was learning, was better than any fantasy I could have invented. 1 year after the accident, Kane Industries held its annual gala. I went as Silas's date. Not his assistant, not his fake wife, but his partner. We told exactly 3 people the full story of what happened: Keiko, Marcus, and Dr. Patel. Everyone else just knew that Silas had nearly died, recovered, and emerged from the experience as someone who smiled more and worked less. The ballroom was full of the same people who'd ignored me for 3 years, but I walked in wearing a dress I'd chosen myself, holding the hand of a man who saw me and felt no need to hide. Nervous? Silas murmured as we made our way through the crowd. A little. Me too. I hate these things. I know, but you look very handsome suffering through it. He laughed. You're getting better at the compliments. I'm working on it. We danced. Badly, because neither of us was particularly good at it, but we laughed through the awkwardness. We talked to board members and investors and employees who all seemed slightly confused by the change in Silas, but pleased by it. Patricia cornered us near the bar. You two look happy. Working on it, Silas said. That's the only honest answer to that question. Keep working on it. She raised her glass. To complicated love stories. We raised ours. Toasted. Drank. Later, on the balcony, away from the crowd, Silas pulled me close. Thank you, he said. For what? For lying to me. I pulled back to look at him. That's a concerning thing to thank someone for. For lying to me in a way that forced me to see the truth. For being brave enough to love me when I was too afraid to love anyone. For staying even when I gave you every reason to leave. I fired you, and you came back anyway. I'm stubborn. I'm grateful. He kissed me under the stars, the city spread out below us, the gala continuing without us inside. And I thought about that hospital room a year ago, the moment when I could have told the truth and didn't. The choice that started everything. I still didn't know if it was the right choice. Might never know. But I knew this. The life we'd built from the wreckage was better than anything I could have imagined in those 3 years of silent devotion. Not perfect, not easy, not without the weight of what we'd been through, but honest, real, ours. And that, in the end, was more than enough.
I hope you enjoyed Silas and Mara's story. If you did, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And if you want more romance, angst, and happy endings, make sure you're subscribed. See you in the next story.